We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility, and that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake, and I'm sorry.
Over the last couple of months, face it, Facebook has opened our eyes to the reality of not having any more privacy online. Our information, our personal data, it's a commodity, and it's for sale to anyone willing to buy it. And I'll tell you, I don't know about you, but I'm just tired of all the apologies. I'm sorry, we could have done a better job. We can put the blame on companies like Facebook, Twitter, and all the others. But at some point, you actually have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, what have you done to protect yourself? Why did you just put all your data out there without thinking about it? Remember, anytime you get anything free online, well, you're the product. If anything positive has come from this online privacy fiasco, it's that we've taken off the rose-colored glasses. We're ready to take some action. We want our privacy back. I'm America's digital pro, Kim Komando. And I have to tell you, for many years, I've been telling you how to protect your privacy online. Joining me in this podcast is Stephen Schillingford. Stephen is a pretty smart guy. He recently traveled to Phoenix, home of the Kim Komando Show, where we sat down in the studios and we started talking about cybersecurity and online privacy. Stephen owns a company called Anonymity Labs. He's actually spent years working with the government and other companies to develop this super secret surveillance software to protect against nation state and for-profit hacking. So, Steve, you've been in security for a pretty long time, I understand.
That's correct.
And how many years?
Over 20. Probably closer to 25 than 20. So.
We'd like to say 20, but it's really, it's kind of like when I talk about doing my show, people say, well, how long have you been on the air? And I can say like over 20 years when, that's a long time to be doing something.
I completely understand. And every year that I add to it, I sort of get more reluctant to actually say the years because it's going by fast.
It is, isn't it? So what was the big security problem 20 years ago that you saw? I mean, what were everybody all freaked out? Was it truly the guy in the basement that just wanted to spread a virus that would put a message on somebody's screen, right?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting. I can still remember the world before screens existed. And I remember the first time I actually found the internet. I was in a college research lab. I found a terminal and I literally got on to the internet and went to a place called Yahoo. And then there were some of these other, tools like Gopher and, all these sites. I never had to log in. I never had to really, get access. And I searched the entire internet in 4 hours. I was done. There was nothing left to see. And what happened is I think, folks like Steve Case and others brought sort of the consumerization of the internet over to non-technical folks where they airdropped AOL discs into everybody's, mailbox.
I loved those AOL discs. You know why?
The cover art?
Not necessarily just the cover art, and that you could actually, maybe do something with that disc afterwards, like to get rid of birds and owls or whatever. But for those of people who are listening right now, you don't know what we're talking about, is that it seemed like everywhere you turned, you could pick up a disc to sign into AOL.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
It didn't matter. I mean, even in cereal boxes, there would be a disc for you to sign into AOL. Well, the reason why I loved them is that back then, is I actually did an infomercial called Computer Tutor, where I taught people how to use word processing and Lotus 123 and how to hook up their modem. And part of that was I built out the section for America Online, the computer section.
Oh, totally. Okay. Yeah, I remember that.
And every time somebody signed in using my disc, it was amazing.
Yeah.
I made sometimes $12.
Yeah.
And I was I was literally, you see people on the street corner spinning signs now. I'm like, here, take an AOL disc. Everybody just sign in all together.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, if I look back at that time, there was sort of an openness. No one really kind of knew what this internet thing was going to be about. Even really well-known folks like Bill Gates were sort of skeptical.
Sure.
And kind of, I'd say the late 90s and early 2000s when people and computers were starting to be connected, there was all this, well, what is it going to be really used for? Like, how can we actually make this a useful tool? And things like e-commerce, like putting your credit card online, you would never do that.
It was frightening.
You would never do that. And no one knew what happens if it got hacked. And there was always sort of this fear. And there were lots of movies about that, actually.
Yes.
I think what's...
And you ever notice how all the passwords they were able to decipher...
Immediately.
Oh my gosh,
yeah,
yes.
Yes. And there was always a back door, and there was always like,
the geeky guy.
I'm a product of war games. I was just walking through your studio. I saw a TRS-80, which is the old Radio Shack built-in one. That's what I learned to program on.
Wow.
I literally used to go in there, and it was a sort of a profound moment for me. But there was no sense of security because there was no one online.
That's true.
And so we were still worried about getting, our wallets pickpocketed at the airport because everybody could be in the airport. And now we're online and everybody's online. And, even the pickpocket, you put the wallet in your back pocket, you could sort of feel it's there. Now our information is everywhere. And I think the difference between 1998 and 2018 is the pervasiveness of all of that sensitive information now has gotten to a point where we just don't know. And part of, I think, what your viewership and what you're bringing to the table is this sort of idea that, well, we just don't lay down. We really don't not do anything. There are things you can actually do, I think, to be more proactive in protecting yourself, just like we did 20 years ago.
And it's interesting that you say that because it's almost becoming a little bit like white noise. Mm-hmm. Is that we have, it seems like every day there's just a new data breach. And, yesterday it was MyHeritage with 92 million records. 3 days ago it was Ticketfly with 26 million records. And we're not talking about like 5 people.
Yeah.
We're talking about 158 million here, or 70 million, or whatever it may be. And there's also the sense now combined with, and I don't know what it was like when you were growing up, but I always remember my father saying this phrase that what happens in the house stays in the house. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, if you got in trouble, it stays in the house. If you're going on vacation, it stays in the house because you don't want people to be jealous of you. Okay, so now we have everything that we do in our lives is out there. It's just on Facebook. They're snapping it. It's on Instagram or whatever it may be. And then we wonder, and then even with Facebook, the scandal, I was shocked by the number of people who were surprised that Facebook was selling their data. I was like, you're kidding, right?
Yeah. I think the house has no blinds, and it never has. And even now, we're dropping in listening devices, and we're in many ways, we're taking advantage of all this tech. And we're not being that thoughtful about the implications downrange. Now, I think the good news is, and I'm sort of optimistic about this problem, is that despite the desensitization of all that, I can't do anything, or, you could even call it learned helplessness, I think people are starting to say, you know what, I think I want to do something different. And many people say, well, Facebook usage went up after, that sort of,
it went up because people wanted to sign in to delete their accounts.
I was just going to say that. 19% of Facebook users, which is, basically the size of a large country,
huge,
deleted their accounts. So I think that's significant. That says something.
And his testimony, I'm sorry, it didn't help him at all.
I completely agree. My frustration, if I could express it, is the people who were questioning him.
Well, they needed some counseling too.
They needed you sort of, as the point person there.
Who was the guy who said he was like a total fanboy? Who was that?
I don't remember that gentleman, but I do remember the testimony.
It was something like, "Oh, my son wanted me to be sure that you know to say hello to you." I'm like, "Oh, really?
Yeah, not
Come
helpful,
on.
right?"
Yes.
But I think that's part of the problem, and there's a broader sort of question that we have to ask ourselves: when is too much power too much power? And when, the sort of systems in place, we don't need, in my opinion, we don't need more laws to handle this problem. We need to use some of the laws we've had in the books for a long time, namely things like when you consolidate that much power under one roof, you sort of have to ask yourself, with great power comes great responsibility.
It certainly does. It does.
And I think that's part of the missing conversation here is, what are you going to do? I know you're sorry, Mr. Zuckerberg, and I know you're apologetic, but you have 12 years of saying you're sorry. And there's a culture that says you're only sorry when you're caught. And
that is
true.
true.
Then what happens is a whole bunch of an apology tour, a lot of obfuscation, and then guess what? You sold that stuff to China. That didn't come up. Right? I mean,
Right.
these are the kinds of things that I think are frustrating people. But I think that we are moving beyond the desensitization to, you know what, I'm going to figure out something to do. And I think, shows like yours and information that you're passing, I think that's the beginning of something here.
Well, because people are starting to connect the dots. They're starting to see things that they may not have noticed before. And even in my own household, we were having dinner. And I was talking about, you know what? I mean, at the risk of sounding not humble, I wanted to go someplace new on vacation, someplace different. I mean, I don't want to go to Hawaii. I didn't want to,
Yeah.
and I was talking out loud. I said, I want to go someplace, maybe I want to go to Patagonia. Okay. I have never talked about hiking Patagonia, Google searching Patagonia. Nobody in my circle has gone hiking in Patagonia. And honest to goodness, I left the kitchen and I opened up my phone and there was an ad for hiking Patagonia right on my phone.
Yes.
And I sat back.
That's not a coincidence.
Right. That is not a coincidence. So somewhere, something on my phone, some app, something that I've downloaded, I gave, because of that terms and conditions that came in.
Yeah.
That's 5 pages. We all just click agree.
That you could never read.
No, we just say, yes, I agree to that. That now my device, my life, is now yet another data point.
There's a great academic who I've read a lot about. Her name is Helen Nissenbaum, and she wrote a book called Privacy in Context. And her whole point of this was, I want to be advertised to. I mean, I have very, I shouldn't say interesting. I have lots of interests. Love football, for instance. And I want to be advertised to, but I want to control that. And it's creepy when the words out of my mouth in the privacy of my own home, behind sort of, closed doors, as your father said, all of a sudden shows up on that personal tracking device that I'm walking around with all the time.
Right, exactly.
That bothers me. And I couldn't say, is it malicious? Maybe not. But it just represents an intrusion that I didn't sort of proactively acknowledge. Now, I did when I opted into the terms of service, but as you all know, I think the average person would have to spend 76 days out of a year.
I think I did read that.
That's an MIT study.
Yes.
76 days out of a year to first of all, read, let alone not understand, right? It's not really fair. That's not really opting in. That's just a barrier to get in and, something for the lawyers. That's creepy privacy when they show that to you. And maybe it's okay, but we've all seen now, thanks to Mr. Zuckerberg, or as I like to call him, Pablo Escobar. But I mean, we've seen how that can be manipulated in a really, potentially dangerous way. And I think that's the challenge.
And it's also the other listening devices we have. Amazon Alexa, Google Home, and, the list goes on.
Nest cameras,
yes.
Everything, your refrigerator now knows, if you're having too many eggs, then all of a sudden now you might be having, you might be a candidate for high cholesterol.
High cholesterol.
So maybe I should send you some pamphlets for free, lowering your cholesterol pills, right? I mean, these are the things that we don't necessarily, we didn't necessarily, to your point, pay attention to. And now all of a sudden we're starting to go, well, wait, that's an odd coincidence, right? And so,
and you start, like I said, you start connecting those dots. And what's fascinating to me too is that I think people are now waking up to not just that idea, but like you mentioned, the Nest thermostats and the Nest not the thermostat, the Nest cameras that may be listening. Now, there's a flip side to tell you though, because I was selling a property in Maui, and beautiful beach house, and just had it all remodeled, and I had Nest cameras in there.
Yep.
And I don't hide them. You see that there's a camera in the kitchen. I mean, there's nothing else on the counter except for this little
circle,
Nest,
right? Yeah.
Little circle thing. And I get a notice that somebody's in the house, so I hop online, and it's real time. It was really fascinating to me, though. On the other flip side is they're in the kitchen and they're real estate gals saying, well, this is the new Sub-Zero, and this is the drink refrigerator, and this is another drink refrigerator. And then the prospective buyer says, Well, of course, she has everything done perfectly.
Yikes.
And I hear the real estate gals, and then they start talking price.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman who's the prospective buyer says, well, I think she's asking a fair price. I'm like, yes, time to raise the price.
Yeah, you're thinking, I should have raised it.
Okay, so there I'm listening in.
Yeah.
Thinking,
Yeah.
And even yesterday the bug guy was there.
Mm-hmm.
And the bug guy's talking out loud saying, gosh, she's got cameras in every room inside this house. Okay. So at that point, I'm thinking, well, maybe it's not such a bad thing. Amazon Alexa.
Yeah.
If you ever go through your managed recordings for that's
yeah.
where she's listening for everything.
Everything.
And I had written a USA Today column about this because I went into my managed recordings. And in my managed recordings, there's a line, we actually played it on the air, where I said,
all right, so I haven't had a chance to review the entire letter of intent, but
nowhere was there an Alexa anywhere
hey, Alexa. Wow.
in that phrase.
Yeah.
But that was sent to Amazon servers.
Yep.
Of which we subsequently moved the Alexa out of the kitchen.
Yep.
And so, but now I have Suri there, who's just a great speaker.
Yep.
And I'm sure she's recording everything along the way. So now moving to where we are today, what surprises you the most about cyber threats now?
Well, so my background, how I got to sort of where we are today is I spent 10 years in cyber. And the company that I worked and was the CEO for starting in 2007 to 2013 was we built surveillance software. And we built it for large companies and well-known three-letter agencies. And the whole idea was...
That must have been fun dealing with the government.
Well, I could tell you stories.
I bet.
So the idea, you could really think of it as just video cameras that were looking at the network, sort of looking outside. And it was right at the kind of peak of nation-state hacking. China was, busting into Google. They had busted into about 50 other Fortune 500 companies. It was a great time for business, and we actually thought we were doing a great thing. I felt very good about the fact, hey, we're protecting folks. That was great. Well, I had to hold certain types of clearances as part of that work.
Sure.
And I started sort of looking behind the curtain and having to go into very dark, big, giant places. And all of a sudden I was starting to see these kind of cameras turn inward. And I started to see this public-private partnership that was, I think many have read about this, and I was like right there. I was staring at it. And I was sort of stunned in a lot of ways because I feel like now I'm an arms dealer. Like I am literally helping them vacuum up like just terabytes and petabytes of information about people who have no idea.
I was going to say they have no idea that anything's going on.
B, there's literally zero transparency about this.
And we're not talking about criminals.
No, we're talking about you, me, everybody in this building, pretty much everybody in the, this country and many in other countries. And it's a joint partnership. It's not just, the nonprofit part of the partnership. There's a very tight linkage there. And that just bothered me. It just fundamentally felt creepy and felt sort of like an overreach. So, that was sort of 2010, 11, 12. I just decided, you know what, I don't want to do that anymore. And was fortunate enough we got acquired by a company that
is that Blue Coat?
That was Blue Coat Systems. And it was great, partnership. They've turned that product now, I think, mostly for commercial. It's doing great. But I had a chance to kind of reflect. I've spent a little time on the beach. And
that's one of the great things, because I think when you can sit back.
I sort of was able to decouple from the day-to-day.
Right.
And I was kind of, I'm embarrassed to say, I had 2 teenage sons at the time. And I went through that phase where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do all this stuff. And I'm going to that gutter's broken, I'm going to fix it. Well, I didn't fix it. In fact, I made it worse. Like, I was not talented for that. So then I was like exploring other interests. And then I found myself playing video games. I was playing, Madden and Call of Duty and a lot of like first player. And I sort of saw my sons who were like.
But you didn't. So you turned into a video game guy?
I played video games as a kid, and then I did what everybody else did. I turned into an adult, and I got a job, and I had no time. Right?
And you had kids and wives and a wife and responsibilities and braces and.
Yeah, I just I didn't have any time. So now I had all this time, and I'm watching my 2 boys play, and we were. I think it was Call of Duty, and they're killing me, right? I mean, they're just
of course they are.
They're crushing me, and I'm very upset about that. Like, I don't like to lose. And
I
I'm
didn't
very
catch. I didn't think you were the competitive type of guy.
And so I was like, okay, I'm going to figure out how to do this. I'm either going to get good. I don't really want to put in the time. I found that these avatars, these characters that you can sort of form, you can actually buy them. You can actually buy them. And so this was like 2013. I went out and got a bunch of Bitcoin. And when Bitcoin was like under $100.
Right. And
I procured one particular avatar, which was like, top of the line, outfitted, had all the talents. And I invited, my 2 sons, Alex and Sam, over.
Did you tell them that you bought it?
Of course not. No, of course not. And
good job, Dad.
And I said, hey, let's get online and play. And I just crushed them. Crushed them. It was the greatest feeling ever. And then I never played again. But I was sitting here thinking, it's interesting because that was a sort of a purpose-built way for me to go do what I wanted to do. I didn't have to like put in a bunch of time or personal information, and I didn't. That avatar doesn't exist anymore, and there's no linkage back to sort of, I'm supposed to be an adult, and I'm supposed to be doing the right things. And I thought, you know what? There are many times in our life when we're going through a different season. So. At that particular time, I was kind of trying to find what the next role was. I've also been, CEO. I'm, husband and a father. I participate in alumni networks. I wear all these different hats. And some people I'm very close to. I trust. One of the other interesting things about the world we live in is we carry around a cell phone number that we've had for a long time.
True.
And it's now like, a tattoo.
Right.
I don't want to give that out to the first person I just met or, to people who approach me at conferences or whatnot. So,
on a Craigslist ad.
That's exactly right. And so I was like, why can't I take the concept of an avatar and kind of creating that identity concept and create a little bit of havoc with these surveillance-oriented companies? And what I mean by that is I'll put the power back in the individual's hands to decide how they want to participate, whether they want to give sort of that intimate personal information or whether they want to just basically, I want to try this relationship out using something else.
I want to have a date before I get married.
That's exactly right. And I thought, that doesn't exist. And I candidly, I was all about, and I didn't know how, that was going to all unfold, but I just felt just sort of emotional about what I had done. I don't want to say I was disappointed. I was disappointed in how that tech got misused, and I was out to sort of fix that problem. So I'm going to go do something. I'm going to go get it for the consumer. I'm going to just tip the scale a little bit. And so that's how we formed the company. That's how, I made the classic mistake that every entrepreneur should never make, which is you go from enterprise, which I'm great at. I can sell to big companies and I know how to talk to those folks, to trying to go talk to consumers and normals, people who very well. And
totally different.
And I always say I'm a reformed data miner, and I'm
Hi,
sort of.
My name's Steve.
I'm humbly here to try to make amends for a little bit of the arms dealing I did previously, and so that's kind of that was the genesis of the company. And
so did you program this, or how did you?
Well, I got a bunch of smart friends. And awesome. I can remember this like it was yesterday, even though it was 4 years ago. We had a very simple premise, and then we sat around a room and said, well, what should we build? And our first, this is not made up, the first app that we built, we called Stranger Danger.
Oh gosh, really?
Because it was
everybody knows the phrase. I shouldn't laugh. Everybody knows the phrase.
But we said, what would we want to use when we met somebody that we just didn't know? I just don't. You and I meet for coffee somewhere. The first thing you do is you size me up, and you do that very subconsciously. That's evolutionarily wired. We just do that. But when we went in the digital world, we don't get that chance. We don't even get that opportunity. We have to basically give our personal information, the stuff that's really sensitive and long-lived and permanent. And I thought, we need to make the digital experience like the one that we're naturally wired to do, which is we get to decide. We get to, make decisions on how much or how little to share. And, I don't have to do it right away. I could have 3 coffees with you. Or you could say, I don't ever want to talk to you again. But the point is, I don't leave all this personal tracking information, and I don't leave this trail that leads to all the things that we read about today.
So the idea came to you that people would have that date before they got married, that they could have that cup of coffee. Let's say, for example, you want to go on a shopping site. You want to try out a piece of open source software or whatever it may be.
So what we're building is this capability, and it's all really around a simple premise, which is, and we call it a pseudo, an SUDO identity. Mm-hmm. So a pseudo identity is really just a proxy for your personally identifiable information, and you use that anywhere you want to search. So it's not just searching on Google, but I may want to search for a house. What does Zillow want you to do? Hey, register.
Right.
Why do they want you to register? Because you're going to get 10 calls from a realtor.
Exactly.
I was pricing out a truck the other day. First thing I want to do is, hey, can I get your mobile number? Well, previously when I do that, I'd get blown up. And I couldn't block the number because they call me from a different number every time.
And that's really interesting about when you want to buy a car online.
Yeah.
Because I was looking for my son.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. They don't show you anything unless you give them their cell phone number. And I'm sitting there like, I'll be damned if I give you my cell phone number.
So you're very sophisticated. You've been doing this for a long time. Many people don't realize that until it's too late. And what the sort of average consumer doesn't understand is that phone number is not only going to the dealer. Guess what the dealer does? He resells it 2 or 3 times down the line to those robo-dialers who then call you from numbers that are unblockable. And so this is one of those things, robocalls, you've seen the articles over the last few months, going through the roof.
It's crazy.
And part of the problem is
it's like 300 million or something like that.
Yeah, and there are 4,000 data brokers out there that are, basically trading in these numbers. They make money whether they connect with you or not. That's another sort of unknown fact.
I read that in the Wall Street Journal. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
That even when they don't connect to you.
Which is why they're so persistent, right?
Yes, they're still making money.
I always like to talk about it's like the Superman 3 problem, right? It's like if I take a third of a penny from 1 million accounts, I get a lot of money, right? This is what the robocallers are doing. And so, I always tell people, whether it's, and especially my family and friends, but we always tell people you should never give anybody your mobile number that you don't trust or know very well. And, there are other examples. Shopping is a great one. We can all sign up for identity theft protection. And I'm not saying don't do that. You should. It's a good service. But there are many sites where I don't care about points. I just want that boat part. Or I just want that really cool jersey. I can promise you, I know this from a fact from my prior job, every site out there is hacked or will be hacked. There's no safe site. So as soon as you put your credit card in there, it's going to get hacked. With our sort of solution, we say, for those sites that you're just not really going to persist, or you don't want to create a long-term relationship, that you just want to date, you should probably use something that's a little bit less permanent. And so we provide, tools where the credit card is essentially like anonymous cash. And the browsing experience is one where there's no linkage or no connection to, Kim, that she's, sitting in Phoenix looking for Boll and Branch sheets or, looking for something that then can show up on her phone. What we're trying to do is create the cash-like experience that we want on places where we're just not ready to commit without leaving all the exhaust. And, searching, shopping, you talked about Craigslist. I think socializing is the other big one. There are like these circles of trust. Our friends and family we've known for a long time. And then there are, associates, colleagues, business. Not all of them need your mobile number. I know my Uber driver doesn't need my mobile number.
No, the Uber driver does not.
The contractor who's, replacing the roof on my house, does he need my mobile number? I really don't think so.
I couldn't believe that Facebook. I passed that along as a tip years ago. You just type in somebody's cell phone number, their profile is going to pop right up.
Yeah.
It's crazy stuff.
It's the largest phone directory in the world.
Right.
And I think this is the thing that I think people are starting to realize. You know what? I used to go, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I think now, and I'm a big believer that structural change will happen from outside the sort of monopoly. And I think this is one where people are going to say, you know what, I choose to do something different.
So let me ask you this, because a lot of people who are listening right now, they want their privacy back, or they want to retain whatever privacy may be left at this point.
Sure.
Because they left Pandora's box open, and now we're seeing the ramifications of that. So we're gonna pull in the reins, which I think is a great time for a product like yours. Is it a lot of work?
I talk about this the way I talk about sort of health, right? I mean, there are lots of tangible values from just eating right, going to the gym, or exercising, or just going for a walk. I think digital privacy is very much the same. I mean, look, I would love to have six-pack abs, but I'm not going to get there because I just like Doritos. It's just going to happen. So I'm
you got to give something up.
I'm no saint here.
You can Photoshop that. And Snap has a filter. You just put that right on there.
Yeah, I need something like that. But the interesting thing is, I think there are steps you can take, and the beauty of kind of taking control of your privacy is, it's not one size fits all. It's we all dress differently. We all sort of think differently, and I think privacy is the same way. I think everybody has a context and a dial for that context, and I think what we try to do is give people tools to say they can do a little. I'm just not going to give out my cell phone number, or they can do a lot. I'm going to create a completely different profile so that as a woman, when I shop online from Detroit, I'm not getting a higher price than a man from Kansas City.
Correct.
Right? I mean, this.
Right.
This is something that, again, is sort of frankly unfair manipulation. It's definitely sort of borderline ethical, but heretofore we've never had that choice. And what I like to tell people is, start small. Just stop giving your mobile number out to strangers. Like that's like literally the easiest thing you can do. And then, you can start experimenting, because I don't think there's going to be, first of all, there's no Men in Black tool that allows you to just erase everything. And I always tell my kids, whatever you do on the internet, whatever you're doing on Snap and on your Finstagram accounts and all the stuff you think you're actually being clever on.
Yeah, mine has a Finster too.
No, it's like that stuff's written in ink. It's never going to go away. And you might not understand the implications of that when you're applying for that job or, whatever. So what I like to say is, just be thoughtful, just like we are on offline, just like when we're out and about. When I walk in the city and I see a dark alley, I don't walk down there generally if it's 2 a.m. That's just common sense. There's a lot online we can do that is sort of very similar and very easy, and doesn't require a lot of technical sophistication and a lot of overhead.
So it's an app. Tell me how it works.
Yes. So today we have an app in the store called MySudo. And this is in the App Store, Apple App Store today. It'll be in the Android Play Store in about 3 months. Okay. And the idea is you download the app and you create your first pseudo or pseudo identity. And we try to walk you through and say, look, here are a few things you need for that. So if I think about Steve Schillingford has a Verizon phone number that he's used for a long time. I have a personal email that it literally has 2001 in the prefix. So it's pretty old, right? And that's what I use, for friends and family. Well, create an identity that sort of is analogous to that and experiment using that for places like where you want to sign up for loyalty. Like I get gas at this particular station at the house. They want my mobile number so I can get 5 cents off gas. And I'm cheap. I want 5 cents, but I don't want to give them that. So I give them, a pseudo number.
Or the supermarket. Supermarket loyalty cards.
Do you ever don't get me started on this. I tried to check out a Best Buy the other day, and I swear I had to click no 5 times before I could give them money. No, I don't want an email receipt. No, I don't want to sign up for your loyalty. And I was like, you're beating me down.
No, I'm never coming back.
It's like I made the mistake of buying something in a store. So that's a great use case where you just sit down and you take those 2 attributes of a pseudo identity, a phone number and an email, and you could use them to sign up for every newsletter that you weren't sure that you were committed to, that you were just interested in.
Right.
Because as you know, newsletters can be very sophisticated. They'll know how you opened it, and then they'll start pinning, kind of where you are and geographic. I mean, we've all been there. I sign up for newsletters all the time. I'm sort of a voracious reader, but some of them are like terrible. Yes. And I want to get out. And, I'm not sure your listeners know this, but, the unsubscribe legislation that's mandated to be in every email. So the legislation actually specifically reads, you have to include the unsubscribe in an email. There's actually no legislation that says the provider has to do anything.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Because, I send out some crazy numbers, like 47 million newsletters a month.
Yes.
But so our unsubscribe actually unsubscribe you.
and that's the problem, right? How many times, and you're doing it the right way, of course.
You're right.
But how many times have you unsubscribed 10 times?
Oh, and then it comes back in 2 months or 3 months. I'm like, make it stop.
Yes. Well, that's because there's no ramification.
BarkBox.
Yes.
I'm talking to you, BarkBox.
There's no ramifications for not taking you off the list. All they have to do is, tell you that you've got the option to unsubscribe. I find it comical. This is another rant about why our leaders in Washington are not capable of regulating and legislating this. This has to be sort of a problem driven, to a solution by people. And that's, this is a perfect example. The legislation's already 5 years too late. It's always incompetent and sort of impotent to change the behavior of the corporation. So, those are a couple quick examples where when you download the app today, you can use a very little service or you can use a comprehensive service. One of the things that we're providing as part of that pseudo identity capability is if you think about, other messaging apps like WhatsApp, they allow you to call their people, but both parties have to have the same app.
Correct.
One of the things that we've been able to instrument is with pseudo, you don't need that. You can use pseudo to call anybody, anywhere, with or without the app. Now, when it's pseudo to pseudo, or when you're calling another pseudo, all of that is protected, encrypted, and super secure. But the other side of that is if I'm calling my, landscaper or whomever, that number that I'm calling from has no linkage back to Steve Schillingford. So if we have a falling out, he didn't trim my grass the right way, or we get in a little tiff, I can just delete that number, get another one. That's all capabilities in the app, and it gives me a little bit of protection. It gives me a little bit of a moat and a buffer. I actually use the app, but going back to Nest cameras, which I have a slew of, I know them very well. I created a sort of pseudo for the family, where all of the accounts, and you think about all the Internet of Things that we're signing up for. The Nest, the Samsung fridge that checks your groceries, the thermostats, the garage door, everything is plugged in. The Samsung TV is the worst, by the way, in terms of listening. That's a dangerous one.
They said they stopped that.
Yeah, well, only because they got caught.
Right.
But I mean, I
liked what they called it. They called the feature it was something like interactivity or some crazy, and you're like, oh yeah, I'll take that.
It's always for us.
Yes, I want Yes, why would I say no to interactivity?
Of course, I want more of that. But I think all of those are great ways to protect yourself and build moats or buffers from these entities that just want to grab. And, I think your example of that hiking Patagonia thing, that's a great example that people go, that's not the first story I've heard where people go, that's weird. I was just talking about that.
And all of a sudden it's like, I do want a new lawnmower.
It's because they're listening.
Well, I'll tell you, Stephen, we've gone over some really important ways to protect yourself. There's no doubt nobody else is going to do it. You need to take control of your digital privacy. And the app that you created is really interesting. And best of all, because you're a Kim Komando Show listener and Komando.com reader, you can try Stephen's app for free for 30 days. The app is called My Pseudo. It lets you send private messages. You can manage multiple phone numbers and multiple email addresses. And you can also create these custom personal identities that Stephen mentioned. You can make them last as long as you need them to. To learn more about it and how to get it, Head over to Komando.com. That's, of course, Komando.com, and search for MySudo, MySudo. Remember, there's a special offer for you. You can try it for 30 days absolutely free. I will tell you right now, it's only available if you're an Apple user. Android is coming soon.